Saturday, Sunday. It's the AFC featured on Saturday. The NFC games are on Sunday. Let's bring KC Joyner and get his thoughts on all these matchups. Casey, Happy New Year, man. How are you?
Same to you guys.
Well, we're at the playoffs, and the Eagles are in them, so that's a good positive. We'll get to that game in just a bit, but let's start with the Saturday games here as that first game on Saturday, Houston and Buffalo. Now, Houston always seems to be in this game, which kind of suggests that people don't care about them. You got Buffalo who, doesn't really have that signature win at all this year. So let's start with that one. And Houston, they got Watson. They got DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, why is this team not more highly regarded?
Because their defense isn't that good, for one. And for two, they're highly inconsistent. And I also look, when I go into the playoffs every year, one of the things I do is I take the division records for every division and rank them to see which are the strongest divisions and what are the weakest divisions, record-wise. Because I've done studies on that before, and if you come from a stronger division, the teams that finish out of the 8 divisions, if you're finishing 1, 2, or 3, you tend to have a much better record in the playoffs than you do if you finish lower than that. And so the Bills are in the AFC East is the second best record in the playoffs. So I like part of that for the Bills, but I also worry about Houston's secondary in that over the last 3 games of the season, actually in 4 of the last 5 games of the season, they allowed opposing wide receivers to rack up 10-plus receptions, 197-plus receiving yards, and at least one touchdown over that course of that time frame. And the Bills ranked tied for 4th in a metric called intended air yards per attempt, 9.1 yards. And John Brown's a big reason why. So I think Brown hits a couple of big plays against them, and I think that's one of the things that Houston's going to have problems with.
All right. We also know both these quarterbacks, Allen, the 3rd best rushing quarterback, Watson, the 4th best rushing quarterback. But the two defenses defend the rushing quarterbacks a lot differently. The Texans have allowed the 2nd most yards against rushing quarterbacks this year, while the Bills the fewest. That might be what this game comes down to. Which quarterback gets off and runs a little bit more?
I think it very well could do that because they're going to be able to take Watson out of there. And the Bills will also run a lot of planned runs with Allen, whereas the Texans usually aren't doing as much of that with Watson. And a lot of it comes down to Will Fuller, too. He's been banged up. If Fuller's at full strength, it adds something to the Houston offense. If he's not, now mind you, Kenny Stills has done very well on vertical passes. He has some of the best vertical numbers in the league on a relatively small sample size, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But they're not the same offense if Fuller's not in there or if he's not at full strength. And I still look at Hopkins and I go, all right, if you're the Bills, I really want Tre'Davious White shadowing him because Levi Wallace played well earlier in the year, but he's banged up. He's questionable coming into the game. Looks like he will play, but I don't want him covering Hopkins. But if I could put White to follow Hopkins everywhere, or at least most of the time, I like that matchup for Buffalo. I like what he'll be able to do there, and I think it'd be a domino effect for the Bills' defense against the Texans' offense.
How big of a game is this for Houston, Casey? Because I feel like every year, we were talking about this earlier, they're playing on Saturday and they lose the game. And they're always kind of sort of talked about, not really. Like, is Bill O'Brien doing enough down there? And is this a big game for Watson moving forward?
I think it's like what Cincinnati was for a few years there under Marvin Lewis, where they would make the playoffs and they would lose. And I think it is a huge game for them because Buffalo, to make it, I mean, Buffalo wants to be at that next level. But even if Buffalo wins this contest, they're not going to be satisfied until they prove they can slay the beast of this New England. That's what they need to do: win the division over them, beat them in the contest, something. That's what they need to do. But for Houston, eventually a team starts to believe in where they are. What Bill Parcells used to say, you are what you are. I think Houston's at that point right now where they have been playing in this game, not just in Wakarika, but in the early game where the league is telling you, we don't think very much you, neither does the country. They need to step up and beat that perception because if they don't, the team is going to start believing this is who we are. And I think it's a problem for them because you can't, if your team starts to accept that's what you are, then that's what you will be.
And on the flip side, Casey, it's an even bigger game really for the Bills as far as who are you really, because, they've made the playoffs now 2 out of 4 years after going 17 years without even making the playoffs, but they still haven't won a playoff game in 25 years. And it feels like if they're going to do it, it's going to be this year's team.
It needs to be this year's team. It needs to be this defense will allow them to do that, and the defense travels well. They've got a ground game they can travel well too, so they've got that going. And Brown is still Josh Allen is a better quarterback than what I think he gets credit for. He's throwing the ball better. He's got very good vertical numbers, as mentioned, 9.1 yards intended air yards per attempt. That's a very high number. It shows when they go vertical, they can get vertical. And plus, I'm thinking of John Brown. beating Gilmore and McCourty on that double move play a couple weeks ago, and I just keep seeing that going. Houston's not going to be able to stop that, so I brought them up and things. I just think that they need more of that big play ability. But this is a contest when I'm looking at it, looking at the playoffs going, Buffalo is not going to be able to put up big points against many of the defenses in this playoff field. I just don't see that they're going to be able to do that. I think this is one contest where I wouldn't be surprised to see them score 20-plus points, and if they can do that with their defense, they can beat anybody.
Yeah, and Josh Allen has never thrown for 300 yards in a game, but he does have the big play guy. Can he do it for the first time in his first playoff game? We'll find out. But if he is, Houston will get J.J. Watt back. He's going to return. Their defense, as you mentioned, has been terrible. But does Watt change this game at all?
Is he the usual J.J. Watt? If he is the J.J. Watt, the dominant, powerful J.J. Watt, absolutely changes the game. He's a guy who you cannot single block him and run block him. I don't think you can single block him in pass blocking plays either, but in run blocking plays, when he's at his best, he will destroy or at least nullify any offensive lineman. You're not going to get a big blocking win there almost in any situation. So it could take away almost one side of the defense that you could run against if he's there. I would bet that he's not going to be there. And if I'm Buffalo, I play with that mindset. I think as usual for him, I'm going to expect that he's going to have some rust.
Yeah, and then, Bills play zone 54% of the time. How does that factor for DeAndre Hopkins?
I think it factors big for Hopkins because if I'm the Bills, I'm just saying, look, we're going to double you, and I want to double him in a way where I'm having White follow him. I just am not going to have anybody else in the secondary. I mean, they've got some good cornerbacks, but White is I almost voted for him for Defensive Player of the Year. I didn't quite get there. I gave it to Gilmore, but he's that good where he can slow your offense down. But I'm just taking one of those safeties and having them follow him all over the place and saying there's certain route combinations that he's going to run, and I'm just taking those away and saying you're not going to run these route combinations. I'm not going to let you go vertical. If you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us in broken tackles. Because I just think if they take him away, I don't think that Fuller's going to be at full strength, and I think it's going to be a big enough factor for the Bills to be able to take him out. I pull the Belichick and say you're going to beat with somebody else.
Wow, maybe I'm nuts here, Casey, but I've picked the Bills to win this game, and I'm almost feeling like I'm smelling the same from you right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, defense and running games travel well, and Houston's defense, hey, if Watt comes back and he is Defensive Player of the Year caliber, that guy, then I would say, yeah, they're going to win this contest. But I don't think he's going to be there, and I think Houston has all kinds of they've got injured rack secondary, and the secondary wasn't very good when it was at full strength anyway. So I'm looking at going, no, I think Houston lays an egg in this one.
Interesting. By the way, Josh Allen, 10-6-1 against the spread in his career as an underdog. As for Houston, 1-5-1 against the spread as a favorite this year. The referee is Tony Correnti. They average 17 flags per game, fifth most in the NFL. Only 4, though, for roughing the passer. Let me ask you guys this question. Bill O'Brien doesn't win this game. Is he done in Houston? Could we didn't see a lot of firings this year, but are there playoff teams that coaches have to win games to stay on?
A lot worse coaches you can get than Bill O'Brien. He could do a whole lot worse than what he's done. I just don't think you fire. He's gone. He's 21-11 in the past 2 seasons, and he's got a banged up team right now. And I just don't think you want to see where the ceiling is. If the ceiling isn't this contest and they need a little more talent, I still give him one more year. I can't fire a guy back-to-back 10-win seasons.
I think the GM gets fired, though.
Yeah. I would agree there. They've been talking about
it. It's kind of a joke because they don't have one. But
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. I think they make that's where they would make a choice would be up there. I think, I agree that they would. That's what they need to do. I don't think coaching. I just don't look at this team and see coaching as the problem. I do see the personnel sometimes as the problem.
All right, second game on Saturday: Tennessee, New England, the Patriots. Plus 21 in the turnover differential this season. That was the best in the NFL. And, of course, this Houston team, we don't think of them as an explosive offense, but since Tannehill has been the quarterback, they have the most explosive plays in the league. Henry led the league in rushing. A.J. Brown has really added to this team, but they got to go on the road to New England. So where's the matchup in this one that intrigues you the most?
I still think that the Patriots are going to have a lot of problems stopping the power ground game. I don't think their secondary is fantastic and it has done well. Although having said that, they have had some problems of late, and I think A.J. Brown can hit a big play because Gilmore had that play, and he's still I gave my vote for Defensive Player of the Year, so he's still that guy. But I just looking at that going, okay, I think Brown could hit a big play. I think Jonathan Smith could hit a big play. Their secondary, I had them as red rated all the way across the board for most most of the season, started to scale some of that back. They're not doing quite as well, but I'm still looking at Henry. If Henry, because Henry's been battling a hamstring injury late in the year, if the hamstring injury doesn't slow him down, it didn't last week, obviously.
No, it did not.
No. If it does not slow him down, then I think that's going to give them a ground game that's going to be able to move, because the Patriots have had problems. I'll just think back to the Baltimore game. The Baltimore just punched them in the mouth. They fooled them sometimes, but for most of the game, they punched them right in the mouth and were able to move them off the ball just man-to-man blocking. And I'm looking at that going, that's what the Titans can do in this contest.
Yeah, and the Patriots blitz a lot. I think this is an offense that can really capitalize on them being aggressive with the way that Brown has emerged, and I think Henry is just so good in the screen game as well.
He is. He's very good in the screen game, and Brown has just been ridiculous the last few weeks of the season. I mean, he scored a touchdown in for the last 6 games. I think that he's the sort of player that you can have any missed tackles. That's the thing too, though. New England's defense leads the league in missed tackles. They only had 66 missed tackles according to ProFootballReference.com. And that was easily, like, the next highest team was 68, and it was like 80 some odd after that, and it just scaled from there. So they were easily tops in the league, but I don't see the defense tackling as well late in the year, which is odd for them because usually they concentrate very heavily on making sure that they're doing proper technique, proper pad level. They concentrate heavily on that late in the year, knowing that other teams don't. So they should be good there, but all it takes is one missed tackle against Henry, just an 80-yard touchdown.
Casey, you're making a lot of great points. I agree with everything you're saying. But for me, it still comes down to Belichick at home in a playoff game. Do you see them going all out, them being the Patriots defensively, just stopping Henry and just saying, okay, Tannehill, you have to beat us? And is Tannehill capable of that? He's played really well this year, but is it a little bit of fool's gold, or no, he's legit and can do it?
I would stop Henry first. I'll bet Belichick tries to do that. And you and I have spoken before about Tannehill when he was at Texas A&M. He goes out in his last game at Texas A&M is against Texas, and he played the worst game of his career. It's the biggest game he needed to play because the last game those two programs are going to play. Maybe they come back together now, but it looked like they're never going to play again. And that's the biggest game of your career, and you lay the biggest egg of your career. And 2 times when he tried out for quarterback at Texas A&M, when he had the tryouts, he played so badly, he put another guy in there, and then he ended up only getting the job because the starting quarterback was really playing terribly. They moved Tannehill to receiver. So his big play history concerns me, and it is Belichick, and it is that defense. And if they do play well, and they do take away Henry, and then they can find a way to make Tennessee one-dimensional and make Tannehill have to pass, I bet he gets some picks. But that New England offense, I just don't know if they're going to be able to get to a point where they could turn it into a one-dimensional contest.
So I would agree with you and Ryan, like that Belichick right now is living rent-free inside my head. And I look at this matchup, and I'm like, he's going to run the Wildcat with Edelman. And they're going to get like 8 big plays off of that. I know he's going to do something that none of us are thinking about.
Well, now he's not because he has our lines tapped.
Yeah,
so.
That's true. The Spygate's going to work. But I just got this weird feeling that he's going to pull out some crazy – it's usually on the defensive side, but this time it's going to be on the offensive side where he's going to have to pull out some crazy stop, and it's going to work. I just have this weird feeling.
The interesting thing about if you ever watch the Do Your Job series from NFL Films about the Patriots Super Bowl wins the last 2 years.
I only saw 8 minutes of Bengals coaches in that.
The Patriots coaches talk about the things that they do, the things that they're looking for. And at one point they talked about how they knew Julio Jones had an ankle injury to where for the last few games of the season he was only making cuts in one direction, that he was making no other. He wasn't cutting off of the bad ankle at all. It wasn't like, it wasn't planning off it. It turned out in the Super Bowl that he was able to do that, but they came into the game expecting he was going to be able to do it. So they get that granular as to saying this is what a receiver can or can't do. And I have a feeling they're going to make A.J. Brown say, okay, there's certain things that you do well. We're just going to take them away and see if you've got plan B. And I don't know if A.J. Brown's going to have plan B. If he doesn't, that's a big problem for them. So I have a feeling that that'll be something that they do. And when it comes to Henry, the thing is you just have to make sure he doesn't break off the big gainers, and they're very good at that. So even if you do get good blocking, don't let him get the 80-yard run. Make sure that you get him to a shorter run than that without missing a tackle. If they do that, then that means that limits Henry's impact on this game.
Do you see anything different from Tannehill in how he runs an offense in Tennessee than he did in Miami?
I think he trusts his vertical passing game more. I think they found ways to get in the vertical passing game more. But in Miami, I always get the sense I'm watching him on tape in Miami that he was hesitant in throwing downfield. I don't know if it's the Gase offense. Although Gase is a good play caller. It's not like he was a bad play caller. There's other things you can question about his coaching skill, but he is a good play caller. But I just got the sense that Tannehill never had a lot of faith in his downfield throwing, and once he's coming to Tennessee, they found ways to find what he can do in vertical passes, and it's made a big difference because when he drops back, he thinks he can hit a vertical pass. Where I think at Miami, it was a very questionable thing where he just didn't think he was going to get there.
New England longest odds to win the Super Bowl any point this decade, but they are 6-0 against the spread at home against Ryan Tannehill. They've won every one of those games by at least a touchdown. So that's what they're going in Saturday. That's the late game. Sunday, 1:05, Minnesota, New Orleans. Drew Brees. Look, he's almost he's 40 years old, actually. I was going to say he's almost 40. He is 40, but he's playing some of his best football since Week 10. They're scoring almost 40 points a game. Why? Is it just because they've been playing bad defenses, or are they that unstoppable on offense?
They are that unstoppable on offense. We've talked many times in the past about how shootout games is where each team scores 24 or more points, how those are 50-50 proposition even for the best offenses in NFL history. Like they win like 55% if you take like one outlier team out of the analysis. So it's a 50-50 proposition. New Orleans has been in 9 shootout games this year. Or actually, they've been in 7 shootout games this year. They've won all of them. They're undefeated in shootout games. It's incredible that they are able to do what they do because they've allowed 24 or more points in 9 contests. And yeah, that's right. And then 2 of the contests they scored 9 points and they lost those games. But other contests they scored 31 or more points and won every one of those shootout games. And they've only had 4 games this year where they scored fewer than 26 points. So 12 out of 16 games, it's 26 or more points. I think that Minnesota, I think they could turn this game into a shootout game, but given that history there and the track record of how good New Orleans is in those contests, I don't think it's a favorable situation for Minnesota.
Yeah, now Kamara wasn't the big guy. Last year he was unbelievable. This year, not the same guy, but in this game here, I'm interested to see. You got Cook versus Kamara. I think those 2 guys will be very key to both how these offenses go.
I think they will. I think Minnesota does need to try to slow the game down. Interesting thing is that if you come into the contest and you didn't know how great New Orleans was in shootout games, you'd say, okay, well, if I've got Cook, Madison, even Boone as a short yardage back, if I've got those 3, they've got Rudolph as a solid tight end, they've got Irv Smith as a good secondary tight end. He would be the Dallas Goedert of their offense. And you look at the receivers, you got Diggs and Thielen. If Thielen is healthy, you look at them, so they've got the weapon, but they should be able to keep up in this contest. But I keep looking at going, okay, I know Kirk Cousins has protected the ball fairly well this year, but New Orleans hasn't had more than 1 turnover in any contest this year, and they've had 0 turnovers in 9 games. I mean, they just don't turn the ball over, and not only that, Minnesota doesn't have anybody as good as Michael Thomas. He's so good, he broke my ranking system in fantasy football. I literally am going to have to rethink the system because he was so off the charts.
All right, let's get to Philly and Seattle. They played a couple of weeks ago. Seattle won 17-9. Since then, they are 2-4 since that game. Philly is 4-0. They had a bye, 4-1. They had a bye in there. What about these 2 teams this time around? About how they've changed stands out the most? We just talked about turnovers there, and you look at what the Seahawks have been doing in the turnover of late, and they had. I mean, you think of Russell Wilson as a guy who protects the football, and he does. But looking from Week 9 onward, they only had 1 game where they didn't have a turnover, and they had 2 or more turnovers in 3 contests. In fact, they've had 2 more turnovers in 5 contests this year. This is a turnover-laden team. And I keep looking at their backfield going, if at full strength, if you guys were at full strength going up against Philadelphia, we talk many times about the 1 gap, get up the field, disrupt the running game, their offensive line would have trouble even if they had the best running backs. And right now they're playing with a 4-string running back and a guy. Look, I know Lynch did fairly well in limited basis last week, but he's not beast mode anymore. So I'm looking at that going, you don't have a ground game and you're going to have to try to throw the ball a lot and you're turnover laden. I think that's a lot of things that go against the Seahawks in this one. Brown's going to be out. Ayupati game time decision. Britt's out. I mean, the left side of their line could be completely different. The center could be completely different. How big of an advantage do you give Philly in the pass rush against that line?
a gargantuan advantage. The Philadelphia's had some problems now and again with that. I think it's a gargantuan advantage, and it's one of those things where, I know Russell Wilson. He's like what Andrew Luck was with some of the great quarterbacks in the NFL history. He's so good that you can have a weakness on offense, and he just with his talents can erase them. But okay, now you have no running backs. Now your offensive line is that banged up, and mind you, they still have impact receivers, but like Tyler Lockett, they're not throwing the ball to him very often. Not throwing the ball to him vertically either. He is making plays when they do get it to him, but they haven't been able to get that vertical passing game going. Hollister is solid as a tight end, but I think the Eagles will be able to take him out entirely. He's a third string tight end. He's put up some decent numbers, but they're not going to have any problems there. So I'm looking at going, okay, I don't trust your ground game. You don't have a tight end. Your receivers aren't doing that well. Your line's banged up. I just keep looking at, and you have to come over across the country to play a game. I think play an East Coast game for West Coast team. That's a lot of factors going against Seattle.
Yeah, and of course the Eagles' right side of the line, Brooks is definitely out. Johnson questionable to play. It looks like he probably won't. So how much will that affect the game?
Brooks is a big loss, huge loss. He's the most consistent lineman that they have, and we've talked many times this season about Seumalo. If you're trying to lean on him, he just doesn't have the consistency. Having said that, they found a way to have success without Johnson, and they can go heavy, and that's the thing. They've got now. It depends if Ertz doesn't come back, they can still go two tight ends because Perkins is a pretty good tight end, and Goddard's one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. So you can give that tackle a lot of help, and I think you can still go heavy if you wanted to because you have Goddard there, and you've got Perkins to be at least the receiving threat if you went into that kind of situation.
Yeah, I was going to say Ertz being out, how much does that hurt the Eagle offense?
It does a lot, but Goddard is.
And he's not officially out, but we're not imagining he's playing.
No, I think he didn't get cleared for contact even today, so if you don't practice all week, you usually don't go. But Goddard has shown that he can be Ertz Jr. I mean, he's not Ertz, but he could be Ertz Jr. And Perkins, we talked last week about it, that Perkins, when he was at Washington, 3 games in his senior season at Washington, he was either first or second, and 3 of the biggest games of the year, he was either first or second on the team receiving yards. So what he did last week wasn't an anomaly that he's never done it before. He's done it before, so now that still gives you the ability to run the tight end route combinations that they like to run when they've got Ertz and Goddard out there. They can't probably be quite as effective, but they can still be effective enough.
All right, KC Joyner here with the playoff preview. Let's take a look at your thoughts. Let's get your picks. Buffalo, Houston.
I'm going to go for the road upset and pick Buffalo.
Buffalo over Houston. All right, Tennessee, New England.
I want to pick Tennessee for 100 reasons, but it's Belichick at home against Tannehill. I got to go Belichick.
All right, Minnesota, New Orleans.
Minnesota, even if if they turn it into a shootout game, they can't win it, even a shootout game against New Orleans. I think it runs us too many weapons. I'll go Saints.
And Seattle, Philadelphia.
Seattle just has too many weaknesses right now. We talked about it just a second ago. They have so many problems going for them right now. That's a healthy. You play this game 3 or 4 weeks ago, might be a different story. And what it is this weekend, I think it's Philadelphia.
All right. He likes Buffalo, New England, New Orleans, and Philly. He'll be back on Monday to break all those games down. And NFL Insider KC Joyner, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Enjoy the games, pal.
Appreciate it.